So you may have all kinds of powers of attorney out there, customs brokers acting on your behalf that you don't even know about. And some of those could be filing anti-dumping entries that you don't.
Welcome to Simply Trade, brought to you by Global Training Center. My name is Lalo, and together with my co-host Andy, we have well over 60 years of combined trade, logistics, and supply chain experience. Along the way, we have seen and witnessed different challenges in trade compliance. We decided to put this show together and call on our friends and colleagues in the business to hang out with us and share their knowledge in all things trade. Thank you for spending some time with us. Enjoy the show.
Lalo, I can tell you, we just had the previous shows on the anti-dumping and countervailing duty,
with Jen and David,
CVD entries and commodities, all that. Quite frankly, that is, makes you about as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. It's like, that is a big deal, and you hope that if you're importing commodities that they definitely have checked out that they do not qualify for AD or CVD, but yet, it's a big deal. So, it's great content on those previous shows. Today, we're going to be talking with Bonnie, who is an actual importer and she's got great experience. But I think that we're going to get some, good details on, well, I'm a compliance person. What do I got to do? I mean,
right.
So what? AD, CVD is a big deal. Where do I go? What do I do? What are the steps?
Right, and her experience is amazing. I mean, she was an importer. I believe that's where she started, was a company as an importer, then became a consultant for several years, helping other companies with topics like AD, CVD, and, of course, countless others. And it's back with an importer, one of the country's largest importers. And so, I mean, she's very well qualified. I'm really excited to talk to her. She's been a longtime personal friend of both of ours, but of also, within the industry, not just as a trade practitioner, but just as a buddy to us.
Definitely. Well, she's one that is. Bonnie's always a pleasure to be around, but the one thing about her is, she is so intelligent, and yet it's great to talk with her. And every time I talk with her, I'm going, this woman's going to forget more than I get to learn. So it's like I'm looking forward to talking with her. So, folks, you're going to be in for a good show. I think it's going to be worthwhile.
Yeah, let's bring her on.
Looking forward to talking with you, Bonnie, here. Thanks for coming on. But I'm going to tell you that we're looking for what I want to hear us talk about. We've established that the AD and CVD situations, the cases, the commodities, when somebody is being an importer, it is a big deal. And you got to really do your due diligence and research to get in and make sure that your products, if covered under AD or CVD situations, that you take appropriate actions. But here's part of the issues that in the previous shows that we had, it is, established as very important. But what I see, Bonnie, is where we're lacking here. I want to see a few more specific actions that come up, what a compliance-related person should be trying to do, because this has got to be a coordinated effort with your purchasing, your marketing, your sales, your operations, the import export, logistics, and all that. So what do you do if you have a new product that comes in? What do you do as an importer at Wayfair or anywhere else, any other company that you do? What's the approach you would recommend somebody take to make sure that they're either proficient in the knowledge that this is okay, or what actions they should take?
So, an example that I like to use for people who maybe aren't familiar with anti-dumping is the avocado case, because everyone loves avocados, right? They love a good guacamole. So what happened was U.S. farmers, let's say you're an avocado farmer in the U.S., right? Mm-hmm. You own a farm. You can sell your avocados for $2 a piece, okay? And then all of a sudden, all of these Chinese avocados flood the market, and these Chinese farmers can sell their avocados in the U.S. for $1 a piece. Well, now as the U.S. farmer, you're like, what the heck? I can't compete with these Chinese farmers who can sell their avocados for $1. I can sell them for $2. Now my farm is gone, right? I can't sell my avocados. So then the US government comes in and says, okay, we're going to help with this. So now what we're going to do is place a 200% duty rate on these Chinese avocados to help our American farmers. So now the Chinese avocados are now priced higher than the US avocados. And as an American farmer, I can compete with, the market again. So I think that's, a good place to start, is to just let folks know that this is really not, is it retaliatory? Sure, right? But it's really to help U.S. Producers and manufacturers and farmers. And frankly, that's what our country is built on. So that's really important. So
Well, I think
as
there's
an importer,
forgive me for jumping in here, but I think
hmm
there's an important point here to delineate. When there
hmm
is an anti-dumping scenario, the accusation is the foreign goods are being brought into the U.S. and sold below cost. In other words, somehow they're being, the government in that country is heavily subsidizing that product,
right,
or somewhere along the lines to where, or the other is a company may, even though it's a foreign company, may elect to sell their goods at a loss to try and gain market share, which is not a fair
exactly.
scenario. So
hmm
there's a difference of dealing with competition versus unfair competition. And I think that's where the anti-dumping cases come into play,
Right.
where it's coming in and it's like, there's no way you can be selling for $1 when, cost alone would make it at least $1.50 or something. Who knows?
hmm Right, exactly. And yeah, the government subsidy portion of it that you mentioned is where the countervailing duties come into play, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have both those anti-dumping and then the countervailing duties, which are addressing that
Right.
subsidy issue. So absolutely. So I think, to answer your previous question, as an importer, what do you do? I think there's several routes you can take. There are some instances where you can say, well, I'm just, I can't, my supply chain can't afford to take on that additional duty. So I'm either going to switch to using a US supplier or a supplier from a different country that's not covered under the scope of that anti-dumping ruling. So for example, there was an anti-dumping ruling in Canada recently on mattresses from China, but let's say you could still buy them from India, right? And you wouldn't have those additional duties. So keep in mind that it also depends on country of origin of, where these goods are coming from. So maybe you find a different supplier in another region that you can source from and avoid those duties. In some cases, you don't have a choice, right? Especially coming from the chemical industry. There may only be one chemical plant that makes that good, and it's in one region of the world. For example, lithium is mined from the ground, right? So there are only certain regions of the world where you can find that. So you may not be able to avoid, anti-dumping duties on some things. But on other things, you can also, let's say you want to stick with that same supplier, are they able to relocate their manufacturing facility? Right? That could be another thing to ask them. If they already have another manufacturing facility, let's use the mattresses from China example again. Let's say that they have a manufacturing facility in India that's producing something else other than mattresses. Are they able to start manufacturing mattresses in that facility now and shift their production so that they no longer fall under anti-dumping? So I think there's a few different avenues that you can take as an importer to try to help your bottom line at the end of the day
So
and
let me
still
ask you
comply.
this. All right, so
hmm
let's take a situation. Stay with the mattresses a minute.
hmm
So if you have an opportunity where it looks like you're needing to bring in mattresses for your stores,
hmm
and so your folks are out there sourcing all of that. In the process of doing that, obviously you also have the scenario where you're should be vetting your suppliers. So somebody says, "Yeah, I can sell those to you," or whatever. Well, get into the corporate bureaucracy, log on and complete the packet on becoming a vendor for our company. In that realm, before even the commodity comes up, when somebody is looking at becoming a vendor of your company, should not the compliance people be involved in vetting that and have a say in the approval process?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And not only, talking about anti-dumping reasons, because obviously, maybe there isn't an anti-dumping case on what you're approving this vendor to source for your company at the time, but then one comes up later, right? But even looking at things like denied party screening,
Right.
right? There are lots of reasons why, and just compliance issues in general. And even, I know that you're going to cover Incoterms in a subsequent episode, but can that supplier act as the importer of record into the country that you need them to,
Right.
and determining those sorts of things. There are all sorts of reasons why your compliance folks should absolutely be involved when you're onboarding a new supplier, for
So
sure.
one of the key things is, I mean, I'm kind of led you along that lines there, but I'm hoping you're agreeing with that. Is yes, is one of the actions, doesn't necessarily have to be the first, although I would recommend that before you get to commodities, look at the people you're dealing with. And
Hmm.
there's several things, just not for the AD or CVD situation where we're focused on today, but I mean, you've got the
Hmm.
Forced Labor Prevention Acts, you've got,
Right.
like you just said, denied parties or restricted party screening, you got all that kind of stuff. So it's going through and getting that all set up is one thing. And then what? What about as far as a part? This is one of the things I guess I look at. And if you are a company that is an e-commerce company, a virtual
Hmm.
store, e-commerce, whatever, even a hard, brick and mortars as well. But I'm of the opinion, and I may be wrong, help me with this a minute. When there is an item added to the inventory for sale, whether it's physically on U.S. soil or not, or wherever, that item doesn't just happen. I mean, it takes probably several weeks for it to go through especially a big company. A small one I get, but it takes a while for you to go through and say, all right, yeah, we're going to be taking pictures of this. We're going to be doing a marketing thing. We're looking at the cost. All those things are going to be
Sure.
involved. And it's
Hmm.
amazing to me that in that process, the compliance folks are usually, left out until the product is sitting at the port going, why is it not cleared? And he's like, well, what is it?
Yeah, that's definitely something that all companies should work on and make sure that they have, included in the process, the trade compliance folks, like you said, because there are all kinds of things. I mean, yes, you need to determine whether anti-dumping applies to those goods or countervailing duties. But what about other, restrictions as well? Like maybe there's a PGA, a partner government agency requirement,
Right.
like the FDA or the EPA or the USDA, right?
Yeah.
There's several different agencies looking at things. So yeah, your trade compliance people should be involved for multiple reasons. And looking at country of origin information. Is this being sourced from North Korea?
Right.
Can we do
Yeah.
that? Or from Syria or Cuba, or right? There's all types of reasons. And when you were talking about needing to take pictures of items and figure out how to market those items and that sort of thing, right? Having all of the necessary information needed about the item to determine the HTS code, for example,
Right.
right? That can be very helpful to have your trade compliance people in, on the front side. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of reasons, anti-dumping reasons for sure. And if something does qualify for anti-dumping duties, what do you then decide to do? Some companies will determine we don't want to sell these items because they would have to be so expensive for us to account for that additional duty rate that we wouldn't be competitive in the market, right?
Right.
Or they may determine that they would actually lose money if they didn't build the additional cost into their product cost that they're charging their customer. Are they actually losing money every time they make a sale? So going tying in your anti-dumping duties to your pricing and what you're actually listing that item for sale as
Mm-hmm.
is a really important part of it as well. So
Okay.
you'd hate to find out, once a customer, what you don't want to have happen is a customer places an order for something and you don't realize it qualifies for, or it has anti-dumping duties on it until it reaches the border.
Right.
And you didn't collect that from the customer. Now you've lost all kinds
Right.
of money.
Well, you've
So,
got a
yeah,
customer dissatisfaction situation, or especially even if it's a
absolutely.
legitimate if you will, fee, duty, all that cost to the customer, they're going to like, what are you trying to do? Now you're trying to gouge me or whatever, and that's not going to work. Okay,
Exactly.
so vetting, being involved in the vetting process, looking at, obviously being more proactive in the vetting of the commodity itself. Obviously, you just mentioned the classification and being involved in that. And so let's take it a step further. All right, you got it classified. Looks like it's coming from China in this case, or whatever else. Whatever kind of. I don't want to. Everybody harps
Hmm.
on China, but it could be anywhere.
Not picking on
Yeah,
China, yeah, but
but
yeah.
all these kinds of things. The point being is you haven't even done any kind of research if it qualifies for AD or CVD. So how do you do that? Where's the resource? Where are you going
Sure.
to go? Well, here's my list of items that are, and where am I going to check that out?
And Bonnie,
Yeah, I know that
what I was
yeah,
going
go
to say
ahead,
is
Lalo.
that question that Andy's saying is I brought that up previously on one of the previous episodes, and I said, I mean, a company may have some resources, but what about the guy or the gal that's selling on Etsy or on Amazon?
Right.
They're just buying, So, but anyway, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of resources that, like you said, bigger companies can use. I know that not to, talk about any specific vendors, but I know that there's a lot of like Descartes has customs info
Mm-hmm.
out there that is widely seen as, one of the good resources for this. But there are also websites, Lalo, to your point. Like, what if you don't have customs info, right? And you're just someone selling on Etsy. You can go basically Google, anti-dumping cases, and you can find all of them. But the best way to do it is to search by HTS code, so the harmonized tariff code for your item. So once you've been able to determine what that is, you can see if that HTS code flags for any anti-dumping or countervailing cases. But just because an HTS code flags for it doesn't mean it qualifies for it. For example, back to our mattress case, I don't remember the exact, parameters of that ruling, but let's say it was something like mattresses 3 inches thick or more qualify, but ones under 3 inches thick don't fall under the scope of the ruling. So you can't determine that just from the HTS code, right? So just because the HTS code flags for it, you then need to go back and look at your specific product and at the ruling itself and say, are there any parameters that I can see whether my item is in or out of scope of the ruling?
Well, taking that a step
So,
further, there was an excellent example that our previous guest had provided, and one was it was a cabinet, let's just say a TV cabinet that
mhm.
was manufactured, but the and if I'm not mistaken, Lila, were they saying it was Indonesia or India or
Right.
it was in the Far East somewhere,
Right.
and it was the top was made out of a certain kind of slate that qualified for an anti-dumping or CBD case, either one. I don't recall which one, but everything else was fine, and the classification on that would have come across as, all right, it's a TV cabinet or a cabinet for televisions,
Mhm.
and yet, and that HTS would not have flagged, but the fact that the top of it, the counterpart of it or whatever, was made of a slate that was qualified. So there's a scenario where I'm looking at it going, well, how are you going to know? So just like you said, all right, so let's take that a step
Right.
further. Um, all right, I'm doing due diligence. I've looked. And you probably need to be documenting on that particular commodity. If it's going into you, you're going to offer it to sell in your inventory online or in the store or whatever. You better be documenting your due diligence on, I've checked here, I've looked here, or whatever. But
Definitely.
are there any other resources that you can think of? Like the Department of Commerce is where the AD and CVD cases go, right?
Right. Yeah, they live there. Yeah, ultimately. Honestly, I mean, just being abreast of what's going on in the space of global trade, right? So there's lots of publications you can sign up for, free
Mm-hmm.
ones that anybody can sign up for that don't cost you anything. Free is my favorite price point, Lalo and Andy. I love free resources. If you go to CBP's website, you can sign up for daily emails from them on various topics, and this is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll let you know, anytime it'll just come right to your inbox and you'll find out when new cases are happening. And to your point, like, how would I have known if that HTS code didn't flag? Staying abreast of all the new cases and saying, oh, there's an anti-dumping, case on Slate. Well, I mean, to take, I know I have that one TV stand that has the slate on it. I may need to go, take a look at that
Mm-hmm.
one. So that can be a really good resource. And just, consistently staying abreast of what's going on in global trade topics. And like I said, lots of free resources to help you do that. Also, partnering with a good trade consultant,
Mm-hmm.
whoever you choose. I don't want to name anyone specifically, but there's lots of them out there. So whoever you choose to do that, and once you form a good relationship with one of these outside trade consultants, they'll let you know, like, hey, didn't you have that one product that had Slate on it? Just reminding you that there's an anti-dumping case on that you might need to take a
Let
look
me
at.
say
What
this is
about
that,
what?
hang on, let me get to that point. I'm sorry,
Uh-huh.
Lalo. But you
No, go ahead.
made a great point, Bonnie, and I love it. But it's like if you're going to do an outside consultant or something to that effect,
Hmm.
it's you're reaching out to an expert outside your company. The one thing that we had two
Absolutely.
attorneys make an extremely important point on that, and that is, sometimes you'll get advice from your broker, and it may be free because you're doing the entry, or they're doing the entries for you and all that, and or a good
Yeah.
friend from a consulting firm. But in this particular case, if you're going to, you need to make sure that if that consultant or whoever it is a paid consultant, because if you do have problems, it's like, again, part of the due diligence. It's, if you're getting free advice from anybody and it runs into problems, well, that advice is worth what you didn't pay. It wouldn't, it would,
Worth what you
right,
paid for it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know about that, but that's one of those that I guess in looking at it, it would make it probably, I guess, worth it. You've done everything you can up to a point. Now you've got enough information. So here's classified. Here's the commodity. Here's the pictures. Here's what it's made out of. As far as the composition of everything, and then send it to a consultant to say, please let me know. I cannot find any AD or CVD or anything else on it. Do you
Hmm.
agree with my assessment? And pay a few $100 if it takes it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Get them to double check your work. At the end of the day, Andy and Lalo, and we've all worked in global trade for a long time. There is a lot to
Mm-hmm.
do, right? And I think one, as I meet more and more global trade professionals, I think one common thread through all of us is that we are overachievers and we're perfectionists and we think we can do everything
Yeah.
ourselves, right? Because we've all worked in a situation where we have been the global trade department are just a team of
Mm-hmm.
one, and that's inappropriate, right? So I think that I struggle with, and I'm sure other global trade professionals struggle with as well, is saying it's okay to ask for help, right? It's okay to like you said, Andy, do the initial work myself and think that I've gotten as far as I can and I know the answers, but let someone else verify
Mm-hmm.
that. Let an outside consultant, an outside attorney, whoever you think is appropriate, just take a second look, right? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I love that, the three of us and the larger community can work together and throw questions at each other.
Yeah.
Like, hey, have you seen this before? What did you do in this situation? I think that's invaluable for
That's what I
sure.
call bird dogging, and it's I don't know the answer, but when you throw it out there, and somebody else may know, and gets me a little bit closer to a resource, and that's one of the things that I like about the different trade associations that can help out. And again, you're not going to ultimately come up with a end solution for everything, but as you get closer, then you're like, okay, now I've got enough information, and somebody can recommend a certain expert or whatever that now, okay, I can spend some money and see if this is valid or not or whatever.
Yeah, everyone, we'll stop here. and the next episode will air later this week. That way y'all can have an opportunity to listen to both episodes in the same week. And thank you all for joining us. We do have quite a lot more information that we're covering with Bonnie, and it's worth the listen. And so thank you all for tuning in, and catch you on the next episode. Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show, or would like to sponsor Simply Trade, or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situation. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only, and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.